This week, I am building a greenhouse. This is a greenhouse for me, but you can take the same steps and turn it into anything that you need. A tool shed, a she shed, a he shed. It's just a little movable building. Actually, it's not movable. I just happened to move mine. Let's go ahead and get into the steps on building one.
I'm going to start off by building the floor, and you can see it's just simple construction. I am using pressure treated wood since it's going to be close to the ground and outside. What you want to do with your floor joists is crown them so that you want to look down the board and find the curve, and then you want to place this where the hump is up, and then this way over time it'll settle into it. Now I have a battery operated nailer, so I'm going to be using that, but if you don't have one, then you could always use screws instead. So a general rule of thumb whenever you're trying to figure out how much hardware to put into material as you're nailing or screwing it, you want to take whatever the material is and divide it by 2. This is a 2x6, so I'm going to be using 3 per joint. There was a 2x8, 4, 2x12 is 6. The next step is going to be to put on the decking, but before I do that, I'm going to square up the frame. Very simple way of doing that is to pull 2 diagonals from corner to corner. Once the number matches, the square is frame. The frame is square. We got 10 feet, 3/4. So let's see, this is the long side. That means I need to go 10 feet. That should be it. 9 feet and 7/8. I'm calling that square. In order to hold square, I've placed this diagonal at least 2 different points to hold it, but then I left myself a place to start applying the decking. Now, normally I would not use high-end synthetic material for something like a greenhouse, but I've actually had these boards left over for about 3 years. However, they are pretty disgusting from being outside for so long, so I'm going to very quickly power wash these. I typically wouldn't pull out a power washer for such a simple job. However, steel has made it incredibly easy to pull this as a go-to tool. As you can see, it's on wheels, so it very easily moves around, but what I really love is that everything is stored on board, and the cord reel. Typically, you have to deal with this kind of tedious hose that you're always wrapping around something, but steel has made this on a reel to where you can very easily wind and unwind it. I'll tell you this, it is very easy to get distracted with the pressure washer once it's in your hands. But let's stay focused. For screws, I'm using stainless steel. This way they'll hold up forever in the outside elements. And of course, this thing is going to be getting wet. Another thing I like about these SPAC screws is the reverse threads up at the head, which is going to pull down the material as I secure it to the framing. This is going to make sense whenever you see the bigger picture, but next is going to be start building out the trusses. And what I'm going to be doing is doing the stud walls with the truss in one go. And I'm actually going to be using my floor here as a jig setup. What I'm going to do is take 2 blocks and secure it to the bottom side of this corner and that corner, and then take 1 block and secure it to, I don't know, about 3/4 of the way up on this side. Okay, so now I can take this, slip it there. This way, we're utilizing the platform as a jig. Now I'm going to be taking these 2 shapes and securing the top of the truss to the bottom of the truss using the elongated ones, and then the peak one to go, of course, up at the very top. Now, since I have a CNC, I did cut these out on the CNC, but I do have a free template with the plans for both of these shapes. So you could just bandsaw these. What you want to do is secure both the left and right so that before securing the top, you can actually pull a tape measure. This is exactly 6 feet across. Find center, which in this case it's easy, it's 3 feet. And then I'm just going to eyeball it, and my center line here where these 2 join is right at 3 feet. But if it wasn't, then you would want to skew it in order to make sure that it's lining up with your center mark. Okay, and then there we have 1 truss. Now we need to flip it over, and I'm going to apply gussets to the back side as well. However, I don't need the jig for that. Now, the gable ends, which are going to be the 2 outside most trusses, are built identical, except the gussets only go on the inside face. And then they also have a collar tie. So I'm going to be placing 1 collar tie inside of the truss itself, and the bottom point is lined up to the top of the gusset. Then I'm going to be placing a top collar tie, which is going to be on top of it. Now, of course, a greenhouse needs ventilation. So on the second gable end, only one is going to have this vent framing. So in order to make that, I'm going to take 1 cross member and put it there, attach it. Then I'm gonna take some simple cutoffs. I'm gonna go ahead and call these jack studs. Lay this center one in horizontally. And then once it's all secure, I'm gonna be able to go to the bottom side and put in these two vents in these little cubby holes that I've just created. Let me go ahead and give you a tip that I love for toenailing. You see a lot of people trying to toenail where they go like this and then try to go out. However, a tip that I learned that I absolutely love is to actually start in the exit, and that way you can guarantee that it's coming out center of the 2x4. So I'm just gonna take this and I get my drill bit started straight, and then I'm gonna angle it and break my drill bit. That is not a good tip. Fire me, people. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is start off with my drill bit going straight, and then as it's going, angle it up, and then go out. And then this way you can always just dictate that it's coming out where you want it. So I just need it held up long enough in order to put on a diagonal. I already have like some screws started here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go from this as high as I can get at corner down to the face of the framing and then secure it once that truss is in plumb. Did she do it? She did. That is how you can install these if you're working by yourself. But if you have a friend to give you a hand, then it makes this step go much quicker. After setting the bottom of each one in with a few toenails, the important thing is to plumb it and then connect with a screw to the diagonal. I went ahead and added in this member here because this diagonal is way too low on this truss in order to do any sort of plumbing. So since these are plumb, by doing a horizontal brace here, it's capturing this, and it will ensure that this one's plumb and also this very end one that is going to go in next. Okay, next I'm going to be adding in the studs, the framing for the back and the front walls. So on the back here, this is just going to give me some framing members in order to put on the siding, which is going to be the next step. These are going to be attached the same way to where I'm just going to toenail in at the bottom and then also along the top. Then on the front, this is going to be creating my doorway. Now I'm going to go for a 30-inch door, but of course you can go very wide or even more narrow if you wanted to. So for siding, I'm going with an exterior grade plywood. I painted it black because my next thing is going to be to put cedar over it. And so this is going to make this kind of disappear by it being black. Okay, I'm gonna nail the bottom first. And this is just to tack it in place, and then afterwards I'll come back with screws. Now the reason I nail the bottom first is because this is a 90-degree cut, and you can see here that this gable end has some play in it. So by nailing the bottom, which is stationary, now I can just plumb the top and then tack it in place. So something else I did is before putting this board, I marked the top 2-foot center so that now that I'm here, I can very easily move my stud into place and quickly nail it. Then we can rinse and repeat, and then I come back afterwards and use screws. The sheathing is now holding all of this framing plumb. So now I can take off this diagonal and then sheath this side, but I waited until last to make sure that I don't mess up all of these trusses in plumb.
All right, next up, I'm gonna be adding in a sill. Now this is mostly decorative, but it's also functional because on the profile here, I actually sloped it away, and I'll show you how I made this detail in just a second. Now, as you can see, I already have most of it around, and me personally, I never like to do miters outside because they will always open up. So instead, I'm gonna be doing a butt joint. However, you can see that since I've added in the slope detail, it's not gonna line up perfectly. I'm gonna screw it in place and then come back with a belt sander and hand shape this. Now, a trick that you can do whenever you're applying your sill that a lot of people don't do is you can cut in a curve right here along the bottom edge, just a little bit in. This is gonna create a break to where when the water hits it from the top, it's gonna drip off at this edge rather than hitting your siding.
For the panels, I'm going with Tuftex multi-wall polycarbonate panels. They have so many advantages over glass and other clear polymer panels, such as they are much more affordable, lightweight, and you can get them at your local home center. It's interesting the way they're constructed. It's 2 layers of polycarbonate with ribs and air spaces in between. And this means that they provide much better insulation than solid materials. Plus, they're super strong. They're actually 20 times stronger than fiberglass, and they're almost unbreakable.
Now I'm gonna pre-drill, but I'm only gonna punch through the polycarbonate. Now I just repeat that same process on all 4 sides. Now these 2 panels are gonna have the vent in it, so in order to create this perfect pop out, I'm gonna use a drill bit to punch a hole large enough for a flush trim bit to come back in a palm router and cut it perfectly flush. I actually started off installing these panels horizontal, but they actually need to be installed vertical. Thankfully, I only had this panel and the other panel on, so just very quickly flip them around. All the same installation instructions apply. If you're gonna be cutting this stuff, like I said before, there's no special tools required. You can rip it over at the table saw, you can cut it at the miter saw, and if you don't have either one of those, of course, a circular saw will work as well. Now, whenever you want to join panels, they do make something called an H channel, which usually takes 2 pieces and combines them together. All right, next up is going to be trim. Now I'm going to be going with Western Red Cedar for my entire trim and then also all of my bottom wainscoting. It's my go-to material for anything outside because of its naturally rot resistant qualities, not only to insects, but also termites and fungus. Now what I like to do is start with the corners here, and you can see it's a very simple L bracket. I'm using DAP's new exterior wood glue on the joint, and then check out these new clamps from Rockler. They have an inline clamping mechanism for a really slim profile, but my favorite feature is the quick clamp, where you can increase or decrease the tension with a knob on the side. When you have it set, you just have to squeeze the handle to apply the pressure. Releasing it is just as quick. Simple pull on the small lever releases the tension. Now before putting on the corners, I do not want water coming in on here and then entering into my trim and then coming down here and rotting out my sill. So what I'm gonna do is apply a bead of caulking along the 2 outside most edges before putting it in place, and that way it creates a nice moisture barrier. When choosing a sealant, my go-to top quality one is this Dynaflex Ultra made by DAP. It is an exterior sealant, but you can also use it interior. It's one of those sealants that if you never want it to fail, reach for this one. When sticking it to the building, I'm still gonna be going with a 15 gauge nailer, popping on both of the corners first and then working my way on the inside. And you can see how quickly this goes and starts really giving it some defining shape. I repeat the same method on all 4 sides. Moving down to the bottom, I'm doing the wainscoting, and really you can do any style you prefer here. I'm personally going horizontal, but you could go vertical. It's as simple as measuring the distance, cutting your board to length, and then I'm using, again, the 15 gauge nailer to tack it in place. Another personal preference was the spacing that I picked out. I just cut some boards to act as spacers to make this step go quickly, but you could make these either smaller or larger gaps. But you can see how the back painted board comes into play now because it just kind of camouflages it. Now, I'm going to show you my favorite method for making a quick but stable door, and that is to do a half lap but with 2 layers of material. As you can see, I already have the base layer of the door, and if you can imagine this going up, this is going to be the show face, and so I put that down. I have saved all of my, I'll call them ugliest boards, for the back side of the door. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the second layer right on top of this, and it's going to alter the base layer. So as you can see, this member here goes on the inside of this board. The top layer, the back layer, is going to span the entire way. Same thing here. This one's on the inside, so this one's going to span all the way to the outside. And after I get everything set into place, I'm actually going to glue and then brad nail these, but I just wanted to show you quickly how it's going to go together. Move here.
Same with this horizontal one. This one's on the inside. This spans all the way to the outside. And this is going to create a really strong, so if you have a gate, any sort of door, then this is a method that you can do. Now, this lip is where the Tuftex is going to come in. This is the small panel just to show you. It's going to rest on this lip, and then I'm going to cut a scrap and do it here in order to capture it. So what I would recommend is that you cut all your boards just like I have done, lay them all out, make sure they're cut perfectly, and then you can come back and glue and brad nail them. Let's talk about hinges. So typically you have to mortise into the wood for the hinge, and that's a pain. So at the store, know that they make no mortise hinges, which have an incredibly low profile so that you don't have to mess with the mortise at all. And they're really cheap. So for these vents, I'm personally new to greenhousing. It's my first one, but I'm gonna start off with 2 vents, and who knows, maybe need to add more in the front, maybe need to add more down low. I'm not really sure. One thing to note is that the screen, this is what the inside screen looks like, goes on the inside, and then you want the louvers facing down so that when water hits it, of course the water runs off instead of going inside. So then on the inside, little opening flap. That way if I need it warmer in here, less ventilation, I think that is way too cool.
So you might be wondering, why did you build a greenhouse in your shop? Well, it is extremely hot here in Texas, so I had this crazy idea to build it in my AC shop and then somehow move it outside afterwards. The door is 119 inches, so I built this greenhouse at 180. Moving it was actually a really fun adventure that I'll go ahead and spoil the ending for you. Went successfully. It involved me being a workhorse, crashing it slightly, and utilizing my buggy. After it was on location, I brought out my portico unit to blow directly on me while battling this 110-degree heat, because then my task was to jack up each side to level it. Once it was on site and level, I brought out my steel battery-operated blower. I find these essential on job sites for blasting away dust during and after the job. These days, I don't even own gas-operated yard tools, as I find the steel equipment has all the power and the duration I need. If you're interested in seeing the entire fun adventure of the move, then check out that video. I tell you what an adventure. You know, building this thing was relatively simple. It took me 3 days, which I think is a decent time if you need something like this size, but everything was so simple. And you can even make it bigger or smaller depending on what it is that you're using it for or how much space that you have. Now, don't forget that I do have a set of plans if you want to build this one. Even if you don't want a greenhouse, you could very easily use them in order to turn it into a tool shed or any sort of a little building that you might need. But if you are looking for a greenhouse, this Tuftex material was so simple to work with, and reading about all of the qualities on the insulation, the strength, it's intended for greenhouse usage. So definitely look at this if you have a greenhouse. And then I love how the Western red cedar pops. You can absolutely come back and put a coat of stain on it. But this is one thing I love about using Western red cedar is that it will hold up naturally as is for a very long time. And then if you like that gray patina, if you don't put a coat of stain on it, then it will get that naturally weathered look. I really hope that you have enjoyed this video. I have really enjoyed bringing you guys along for it. Who knows what I'm building next, but I'll see you on my next project.